Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, podcast episode number 137. I'm your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. And this includes vessels of all sizes and shapes and construction methods and colors and wood species and ages and everything. If it's got wood, if it's made out of wood, then we talk about it here on Hooked on Wooden Boats. Thanks for joining me today for the podcast. We're doing this every other week right now because life got busy. So I wish I could do it every week, but we may go back to that format in the future. I should say I may go back to that format in the future because it's me, myself, and I doing the podcast. Anyway, we've got a great episode planned today. I'm going to play an interview I did a couple weeks ago with Carol Hasse of Port Townsend Sales and Barb Trailer of the Northwest Maritime Center in Port Townsend, Washington. And I thought it would be fun to talk about the history of the Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend, which started in 1977, was the first one, because this is the 38th annual this year. Carol Hasse was there from the start, and so she talks about how the whole thing came together, who was involved, kind of how Port Townsend became a wooden boat. What's the word I'm looking for here? The mecca of wooden boats, at least in the United States or on the West Coast. And then Barb talks about some of her memories of the festival over the last years and also what's happening at the current Wooden Boat Festival in September of this year. It's actually September 5th through the 7th. So it's really fun, so stick around. We're going to play that here in a few minutes. Okay, so as I just mentioned here, the festival is upcoming here September 5th through 7th. This is my favorite event of the year. It actually starts Thursday evening, September 4th. They have a presentation for Lifetime Achievement Award on Thursday evening. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the festival's open. So I'm going to head over Thursday afternoon, and I'm planning on taking my dory, the Dawn Treader, which I'm working on to get her ready to sell. I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to go over Thursday. Friday, I'm going to be teaching my class that I did last year called Building Your First Wooden Boat, a Primer. And it's basically kind of a 45-minute overview of my ebook, Get in the Wooden Boat Game, a guide for building your first boat. And I'm looking forward to that. I haven't taught that class since November. And so I'm going to be doing that on Friday. And then other than that, I'm going to try to attend some of the presentations myself. And I'm going to do some interviews and hang out and have my dory there for sale. And I might take my canoe also. I'm not sure about that. I haven't decided. So I'm really looking forward to it. Had a blast the last 2 years where I've actually gone over and spent several nights there and been there for the entire festival, which really makes it a unique experience for me other than what I did for many years, but I would just go over for the day, spend about 6 or 8 hours there, and then go home. But it's fun to be there for the whole thing and really connect with the people. So I'm really looking forward to that. If you can make it, I would highly encourage it. It's a great festival. Lots of fun activities, great boats, good sessions to attend to learn new things. The weather's typically really good. I mean, it's just a blast. So September 5th to 7th. And if you can make it, shoot me an email, and we'll try to hook up if we haven't met before. And my email address is dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. So yes, I have been working on my dory. I've got her turned upside down right now, and I'm painting the hull. the last time she was painted was 1997, 17 years ago. And, the paint is remarkably not in too bad a shape. I mean, it's going to look a lot better repainted, but it's not like all the paint came off of the boat or anything. There were some scratches and dings, especially on the bottom where she'd been beached, but this paint was amazing. I think I used one of Pettit's one-part polyurethane paints when I painted it. So anyway, I sanded her down and reprimed some spots. Yesterday I put on the first coat of fresh top coat, and this time I'm using a product from Jamestown Distributors, using their, it's called the Total Boat one-part polyurethane paint. So I put on the first coat yesterday, and I'm going to do a little light sanding on that today and put on a second coat and see how she looks. And if she needs 3 coats, I'll do that. And then I'll get her turned over and paint the thwarts. Actually, I got to paint, after I do the white bottom paint and hull paint, I've got to paint the top strake of the boat, the sheer strake. I'm going to paint a real pretty green. And then I'll get her turned over and paint the thwarts green. Touch up the interior. I just had the motor tuned up, put that on, fix a few things on the trailer, get it looking real pretty for the festival, and she'll be good to go. So if you have any interest in buying a dory, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm trying to figure out the price. 1997 dory, 14 foot 2.5 inches with a galvanized trailer and a 15-horse Mercury 2-stroke outboard, made in 2000, and everything's in great condition, also with a boat cover, oars, sail rig partially completed. So there you go. I'd like to give a shout out to our new subscribers for the Hooked on Wooden Boats newsletter: Tom Quinn, Dennis Schroer, Lloyd Blake, Oscar Lind, and John Alsop. Thanks for subscribing to the podcast newsletter, guys. I appreciate it. If you would like to subscribe yourself, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe and give me your name and email address, and you're all set for being on the newsletter mailing list. Okay, we're going to move on to the interview with Carol Hasse and Barb Trailer. Carol has her own sail shop in Port Townsend Sails since 1977, I believe. And Barb Trailer is the co-festival director, along with Carrie, for the 38th Annual Wooden Boat Festival in Port Townsend. So let's roll the tape. Take it away, Carol and Barb. Okay, it is July 24th, 2014. I'm at the Northwest Maritime Center with Barb Trailer and Carol Hasse. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to have both of you here. And anyway, I thought it'd be fun to talk, get together and talk about the festival. And so I wanted Hasse here, as she goes by Hasse rather than Carol usually, because she's been here since the beginning for the very first festival and was part of that. I thought it'd be fun to talk about that history and then talk about this year's festival with Barb. So let's start with you, Hasse. Tell me how that first festival, give me a little background on that, how that got started, who was involved, and that sort of thing.
Well, without making the story too long, those were pretty magical years for most of us who were in our early 20s and had discovered boats. And there were 2 hippie commune boat building operations in Washington State then. One was out at Moclips, ferro cement boat, that was a Samson design, and the other was up in Bellingham, the one I was involved with, and it was the Skookum 47, and we bought the Bear Hull here in Port Townsend from Bernie Arthur and his crew at Skookum, and taken it to Bellingham, and there were 8 of us that were putting this boat together, and our friends out in Moclips, who had named their boat the Moclips, were invaluable partners in things like felling the trees for the spars, and we went down and helped them plaster the hull, and they would come up and help us do major things that needed to be done on the boat that required a lot of human power to do things. So when the Moclips launched their boat, they were kind of nowhere on the west coast of Washington in terms of marine services. So they brought their boat up the coast and turned into Point Hudson, sort of almost by accident. And Sam Connor was one of the people aboard the Mo Clips, one of the three guys. Jim Steffen, or Steph, and Vince Kelly were the other two. And they found that they could actually get a job here at Point Hudson. And they were hired by the then leaseholder, and he leased the whole port, George Rowley did, and he had a 50-foot wooden boat called the Boleyn, a power yacht, and he hired Sam and his crew to work on the boat and said, you know, all those buildings here over there, which we now call the sail-off building, they're sitting empty. If you want to open those up and get your tools out and get to work, you just go right ahead. So that's how the wood boat shop first started. So Sam took a look at that beautiful shop and the beautiful harbor and decided he was going to start a wooden boat shop. And that, to my knowledge, was the second one, maybe the third big wooden boat project in Port Townsend at the time. Jimmy Lyons had built this beautiful Friendship sloop, and Jimmy Lyons is still a main member of the Shipwrights Co-op. And Mark, oh dear me, I'm not going to remember Mark's last name. His business became a refrigeration business as time went on, but he taught Ernie Baird boat building, and he had the first real wooden boat thing going on here in Port Townsend, and both those operations were down at the Boat Haven. Nothing was at Point Hudson then. So Sam got the shop going, and they called us up in Bellingham and said, hey, there's work here. So we packed everything on that boat, came down. I was actually in the Volkswagen van with a lot of the tools and slept overnight to catch the ferry the next morning to come into Port Townsend, and we set up camp here, and we were going to earn enough money to take our boat offshore, which did happen, although for some of us who fell in love with Port Townsend and the opportunity to have our own shops, we didn't necessarily take off right then at that time with those boats. So to not make the story too long, Sam and his then wife Maribel had friends from the East Coast that were involved in Wooden Boat Magazine, and one of them was Tim Snyder, and Tim Snyder and Sam concocted this idea of having a wooden boat festival, because anyone could look at Point Hudson and imagine what a beautiful, beautiful place it would be to gather all the classic wooden boats that we knew of on the coast, and to share ideas about how to maintain them and enjoy them and to enjoy one another. And it was a pretty obvious thing for me to see that this was really a campus of sorts, that I could picture it year round being full of beautiful boats and kids out on the water learning, and people learning to work with their hands, which was a little bit of a renaissance culturally back then. Most of us had been raised to go to college and get some sort of white-collar job to make something of ourselves, and a lot of us really felt that maybe there was something else that we could do and wanted to do. So anyway, we just had this ragtag, I think we talked about it in the sauna that was then in the garage of the pilot house where Sam Connor and Maribel lived, and rented that place where the pilot house on the corner there, right next to the sail loft. And after a lot of time in the sauna that probably involved some rum, we all decided the Wooden Boat Festival should happen, and we made ourselves officers of the board. I was the secretary, and I believe Sam was the first president, maybe Tim was, and it was the hard work really of Sam and Tim that whole event happened. And as time has gone on, some of the names I should remember better. One of them, Earl Wakefield, and then there was another gentleman from Port Angeles I can see so clearly, but I apologize to him now, I can't remember his name, worked so hard to make sure that the marine trades of the peninsula were represented, that Earl was involved in at Gompers, which is what Seattle Central Community College was called then. They had a technical boat building school at that time, And basically we just gathered everybody that we knew. Jimmy Lyons, I think, was around, or not Jimmy Lyons, but I mentioned him already. Jim Franken was around then. He's the gentleman who went on to design the Bryony that was built by the boat school for the then President Kitty Rytel, and that boat's still around in the family of Port Townsend boat builders. And anyway, the first successful festival, successful in beyond our wildest imagination, then spurred what now is, decades later, still an exciting event. And the first one, we had a grand dream that there would be a symposium that preceded it. And we didn't have a facility here then of any stretch of the imagination, so we rented some of the classrooms out at Fort Worden. And we got John Gardner from the East Coast, and Nat Wilson, sailmaker, Nick Benton, rigger, and a few other luminaries to come out. And there were classes that were a week long that preceded it, and then the festival itself. And we lost a lot of money doing the classes, and we thought,
really?
Okay, well, next year we'll put them afterwards, because people came to the festival and they were so excited, and they wish they'd known. They would love to have gone to those classes. So then we set it up that way the next year and lost money again on it. And we realized that really the only way we could maintain our Wooden Boat Foundation, which was the name of our organization, the Wooden Boat Foundation, was through the proceeds of the Wooden Boat Festival. And the intention was, with that year, with the proceeds of the Wooden Boat Festival, we would be able to have an office and a year-round facility with a library and classes and. And of course, it was not an easy thing to afford, and it was kind of a one part-time job for the director and maybe a ragtag bunch of instructors that we could pull together at the last minute. But it grew and grew and grew, always struggling financially to keep it together, always with the Wooden Boat Festival being the premier event that brought people together and gave us some income. And I guess if I were to say anything about that festival, is it just never ceases to amaze me. Its beauty, its magic, its enduring joy that it brings to those who are there and those who come back. And here it is 38 years later, and it still has the same soul. It's got and our population swells to at least twice, if not 3 times, what's normally within our city limits of people, and we've never had a violent crime or even petty theft to speak of in people's boats, and businesses are open, and it's just this magical appreciation of what we all love about being on the water, and the skills that it brings to us, the spiritual nourishment that it is to be out there on those boats, and the camaraderie of people that share those values. It's just something really special.
So Hasse, I'm just curious, was the first festival 2 days, or was it 1 day? Do you remember?
I'm pretty certain it was 2 days. I think it was always that format, and then we'd have the regatta happened earlier on Sunday. It usually happened about noon, so things broke up maybe a little bit sooner. Mm-hmm. And we stopped doing the week-long symposia, I think, after the second year. We saw that wasn't going to fly.
Was it in September from the start also?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I don't believe the dates changed. It was always the weekend after Labor Day, because the next year, Victoria followed suit with their Classic Boat Festival, and they decided to do it on Labor Day weekend. Yeah, and that was kind of through a wonderful connection with friends up there that I'm still quite involved with, and they're still running it. It's pretty great, and they're now the directors of their maritime museum and doing all kinds of good work up there in the classic boat world as well. And
so when you guys started the first festival, did you intend to make it an annual event at the time, or are you just going to kind of see how it went?
Well, I think we sort of did.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, if it had been a big flop and no fun and we all went in debt or something, we probably wouldn't have done it again. But it was such a overwhelming success, and really the dream all along as the Wooden Boat Foundation was that somehow we were going to generate all kinds of money from this event to have classes all year round, or to be able to have a community schooner that we financed and had built with trainees. We pictured everything from what the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building is to what we have here today. It was pretty far-ranging and
wow.
Hopeful, as things often are in your youth. And but at the same time, it was pretty humble to begin with, in terms of moving from office to office on Water Street, finally getting back to the Cupola House with our then director Scott Swatner and Alicia Alvarez. Kind of brought us all home and back to here, but it's really been a pretty magical thing in so many ways. And one of the things that I'm always thrilled with is the inspiration it brings to people who visit here at that time, who then decide to stay. People who have done amazing things, like starting the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building and keeping that going on, or starting Eden Saw Woods, or any number of people who've come here already skilled, or come here and gone to the boat school, and then are now operating their own marine trade, and everything from foundries to being shipwrights to sailmakers, all that stuff. It's just spawned so much of a maritime trade economy in our community, and let us be an authentic maritime community in the Northwest that's really got its own thing that anybody visiting here on a boat sees pretty quickly as very high quality and very very unique on the whole West Coast. Maybe even on the whole continent.
Yeah. How many boats and people do you think were there that first year, Hasse?
Well, that is a really good question. I remember the harbor being packed, and it wasn't configured a whole lot differently.
Really?
So, with boats of all sizes as well. So I would say, now Barb and Carrie and the people that have been handling the harbor services as volunteers have figured out how to shoehorn in a lot more boats than we ever probably could have done then or had to do then. But I would say at least 3/4, as I look out, half to 3/4 of the number of boats. And the crowd was big too. I would easily guess that we had close to 5,000 people.
Wow.
But
Can I ask how you got the word out at that in 1977?
Well, that is a really good question. That's just a really good question. And that would be something that Tim Snyder might remember, or Sam Connor might remember. I know the people of Wooden Boat Magazine were on board in some way, because that's how we got Tim Snyder, and so I suspect that had a lot to do with it. That their mailing list, or because this had to have been pre-email,
and
maybe even pre-fax.
Did the parties just stumble upon the first festival, or did they?
I just think we got the word out.
Yeah,
we just got the word out to people with wooden boats, and there were a lot of people that were starting boat shops. I think Sam Devlin might have been here for the first one. He had his boat shop down in Eugene on Fern Ridge Reservoir then. But I think anybody that read or advertised in Wooden Boat, we probably had access to them. Wooden Boat Magazine is my guess. Center for Wooden Boats Festival had started the year before. I don't know if Sam and Tim contacted Dick and got that info or not, but I think it was just kind of right time at the right place. But but I mean, I remember it being a very full harbor and a very big party, and it was, a lot less organized in terms of the educational component, but that was definitely a piece of it. And there were dogs on the dock, and there were, it was a little probably looser than it was the way it could have been then, but can't be now, in terms of that sort of thing. But in terms of the spirit of it, I don't think it's changed a bit. I really don't. Some people will, will be maybe after all these years maybe expecting a different thing if they arrive by boat or by land, and they might, because of those expectations, they might be disappointed and express that. But boy, we just don't hear that many complaints or upsets any of the years, really. I think people are just kind of overwhelmed at the beauty of the boats and the willingness of people to share their vessels and to share information and how much they get for their minimal entry fee in terms of experiences for their kids or classes or all that sort of thing. It's real magical that way.
Do you remember any of the boats at the first festival? Any boats stand out, Hasse?
Well, I'm remembering a George Bueller design 32-foot double-ender that had been built in Squim by Doug and Susie, whose last names I'm not pulling up right now, who actually went on to circumnavigate in that boat, and that was kind of a big fun thing. I'm pretty sure Jeremy Snap from Lopez Island came down with a boat. What was it? I think it was Tom Gilmer designed double-ender. Her name now is Phoenix. I don't know what it was then. I'm pretty sure there was a boat here that was a 21-foot Atkin design transom stern boat. It was a sloop that belonged to Steve Snap and his then wife Lisa Vizzini, and Lisa runs Port Townsend rigging now with her husband Dan Colleen, and they would sail that boat every year from Port Townsend to Elfin Cove, Alaska, and hand troll for salmon. And this little 21-foot boat, and I should remember her name, but I'm not pulling it up right now. And then Bruce Tipton, the spar builder now, came pretty early on because there was a group of artists who lived in an artist colony called Alexanders by the Sea in Hump Tulips, which was not far from Moclips. So the Moclips and the Hump Tulips tribe were pretty closely aligned, and Bruce was part of that artist colony, as was Pam McCullum, who's married to John Kleiss now, and a brilliant artist and citizen of Port Townsend, and Jeanette and Robert Forrest were part of that. And they all came and lived in the cupola house over here at the head of the harbor, and Bruce started building boats pretty early on. He was building a peat color schooner for Annie Welch, and so those are the kind of the ones that spring to mind that and of course Sam had built some lovely white hulls and maybe a wherry that were in the show. And
did you have a boat in the show at that time?
I did not. No. I got Lorraine in January of '79, and I've had her since. But part of it was, as emerging marine tradespeople, Sam Connor and others, they wanted the opportunity to show what they could do, to potentially have customers and to, that sort of thing, and again to learn together. But I'm pretty sure Sam Devlin had some boats here, and I think Jimmy Lyons had his beautiful Friendship sloop here. Jim Peacock might have had Eileen here.
I think Jay Benford had his boat here. He sent us a picture of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And Atkins.
Oh, was it? I thought it wasn't his own design, Jay Benford, the sunrise?
I'm not sure. We have a picture of it though.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Wow. So Point Hudson was a military facility of some sort.
It was a Coast Guard base.
Oh, it was a Coast Guard base.
I found out later my uncle was here. And I found out later my dad did his basic training at Fort Worden, including the landing barge part.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. When I told my dad thought I might stay in Port Townsend and open a sail loft, he said, "That godforsaken windy blowhole? Why would anyone want to live there?" But he was doing a landing barge in February at Fort Worden, so I can only imagine why he wouldn't want to live there.
Oh my goodness. So when did the Coast Guard move out of the... do you know?
I think it was in the 50s, and then it was a community center for a while, and the wood boat shop that Steve Chapin builds those beautiful pocock shells in became a bowling alley for a brief time, and there was it was always a marina. There used to be this big funny sign on the what's now docks bar and grill, or marina bar and grill. That was the marina office back then, and there was this big plywood sign with bulbs on it that would tell you whether you could go across the straits or you should stay. You know?
Oh, really?
It was hilarious.
Red light, green light.
Yeah, exactly. It was great.
That's funny.
And the docks at that time were the old submarine net floats. So apparently the Navy had strung submarine nets across Port Townsend Bay and probably off Marrowstone Point and Admiralty Inlet, just to make sure that submarines got down to Seattle or into Puget Sound. And
really?
And so when that was all done, all those floats got towed to Point Hudson and cobbled together as our docks, and they were only replaced 5 or 6 years ago. They were pretty funky. You felt like you got off the boat and you were surfing. Whoa, is this dock going to stay put? Or
does the government still own the land and buildings?
The Port of Port Townsend
Port
does.
Okay.
Yes.
Everybody leases from
So I
them,
think it went first to the Army Corps of Engineers and then to the port, if I'm remembering correctly. So.
Wow, fascinating story.
Yeah.
Anything else you should add, Carol?
No, just how grateful I am that we have this beautiful place.
Yeah.
In the Northwest, which is a fabulous spot to be, period. But Point Hudson never ceases to amaze me with its beauty. That you can look out and see 2 mountain ranges and 3 volcanoes, and look off to Canada and just have this expanse of, wow, look at the places I could sail or hike or partake of. It's very, very nurturing to be here. And it seems to draw some pretty amazing people.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative
Continues
of that.
to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
People all the time, yeah. Well, Barb, let's talk about this year's festival. Give us some highlights and all that good stuff.
This year we're so excited about the people that are coming, the boats that are going to be here. It's just, it's really an exciting year. We've got Virginia V coming, the last steamship of the Mosquito Fleet. Huge boat coming, and we're going to put her in the harbor. Pacific Swift is coming, which is a big tall ship from Canada that we're really excited again to have down here. Lady Washington will be here, and of course the Odyssey and Adventurous and Alcyone and some of our favorites. For speakers, Steve Callahan, who was the author and survivor of Adrift, 76 Days Lost at Sea, will be here. And Lynn and Larry Pardee will be back. Halsey Hershoff will be here. It's just, Colin Angus will be here. It's just unbelievable how exciting our lineup is this year. And as well as, again, all the people that come year after year. So we've got the best of mix of old and new presenters. It just seems like every year the boats that come and the quality of boats just gets better and better, and the spirit. When we got hired I'm so happy to hear Hasse say that. It feels the same, because that was our mission when Jake hired Carrie and I, was to maintain. That was our number one priority, was to maintain the feel of the festival and the heart and soul. So it's wonderful, and we spend a lot of time making sure we do that. So that's some of what is great this year is that it's bringing in tall ships and new ships, and the small boat wave that's come in is a really exciting wave, and we hope that's drawing in newer and younger people into the business. The paddle boards and the kayaks, it's just all fabulous. Family activities.
Well, so I just met Colin Angus. Could you tell us a little bit about him? He's a pretty interesting guy.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. He has how he ties into the wooden boat world is he has a boat building company, Angus Rowboats, up in Canada. But what he's famous for is for his solo circumnavigation by human power, which was pretty amazing, rowing across both oceans and bicycling across Siberia, for instance. He's unbelievable. Him and his wife both, and they have 2 little kids, and they're just spectacular humans. Young, and when you meet them, you wouldn't believe this little scrawny guy did that. You know, you kind of expect some big herky guy, and he's a little lovely young guy. And he's also rode up the Amazon, and to do that they had to hike across the Sahara. I mean, he's an unbelievable adventurer and just one of the nicest people you could ever meet. So we really enjoy him coming.
Yeah. So for people that might be coming for the first time, what maybe give us the dates and times and cost and what to expect, what the schedule is and stuff.
The kind of the soft opening of the festival is Thursday night, when the Bar Harbor opens and we open up the music, and that's in the past that's been traditionally kind of locals night, where people come in before the real crowds get here. So Thursday night is kind of a nice, real welcoming, fun time to walk through the festival. But the gates officially open at 9 in the morning on Friday. And pretty much it's chock full of activities until midnight every night. There's presentations going on 5 different stages all day, every day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And there's at least one race or regatta every day. And there's opportunities to get out and row longboats and go sailing and charter on the big boats. The Kids Cove is open with tons of kids activities all day, every day. And at night, pretty much everybody winds up in Bar Harbor and dances till they can't dance anymore. This year, Steve Callahan was the technical director for the movie Life of Pi, which was quite a famous movie.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so he will be here. We will show that movie Friday night, and he will do a question and answer after. That's sponsored by the Port Townsend Film Festival. So they'll do it in Rose Theater style, where they'll get up and tell you a bit about the movie and then show the movie. Yeah,
where are they going to show that?
Here in the main maritime meeting rooms.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be that's 7 o'clock on Friday night. So that's a highlight. And then Saturday, all-day presentations again. There's 5 stages, 3 indoor and, actually it's more than that. 4 indoor and 3 outdoor stages going all day, every day. And again, Saturday night, big dance. The Fisher Poets do their thing in the maritime meeting rooms on Saturday at happy hour, and that's kind of a fun thing for people that like those salty tales. It's gaining a lot of popularity. And then Sunday, of course, is we have a heavy lineup of Steve Callahan doing his Adrift talk, Colin Angus doing his talk, and Lynn and Larry Pardee doing some of their presentations. And so for people that have toured boats for a couple days, they can save the presentations for Sunday and just take a nice mellow day and hear all these phenomenal presentations, which is a great thing to do. And then the crowning glory of the festival is the sail by. And that's just magic. It's just the most magical moment you could imagine. And that's at 3 o'clock on Sunday. And being out on the Commons or in Wee Nip, out at the Point or on the Balcony Wine Bar is it's spectacular. So
cool. What are the dates, Barb?
September 5th through 7th.
5th through 7th.
Yeah, so it ends Sunday the 7th at about 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there an awards little get together Thursday night for was it Maritime Person of the Year, or what's that called?
The Lifetime Achievement
Lifetime
Awards.
Achievement Award.
Yeah, that happens at 5:00 on Thursday.
Yeah.
And that's a really special presentation here in the Maritime Meeting Rooms. Again, it's open to the public. It's free. And it's a room full of luminaries and notables and people.
Yeah.
This year, one of the highlights of that is the Daubenberger family, where he really started sailing in the Port Townsend community, is one of the people being honored. So I expect, and they started a sailing school, and some of our local sailors
in the 60s
off of Suva were in their first class. So it's going to be a pretty fun night. That's going to be a pretty spectacular night.
Very cool. So I'm just curious from both your perspectives how the festival's evolved over the years. I know you've been involved for quite a few years too, Barb. What I know a lot of it stayed the same. The souls kind of stayed the same, but how has it evolved or changed? Or
That's a really good question. One of the things that I appreciate is that I don't know if it was the first festival or the second festival that Lynn and Larry Pardee sailed in Seraphin, their 24-foot boat that they built and had just done a circumnavigation. So they sailed in from Japan, and they've come back sometimes by boat and sometimes in person all those years. And there are a lot of our mentors and elders that John Guswell still participates in boats that he built, and I think there have been times when we weren't as blessed with the smoothest of festival coordination or coordinators at that time. Through the 38 years, there have been some years when things could have gone more smoothly. But people who've attended have always been very committed to making it a good experience, with their boats or with, being on shore. So I think the evolution has really been towards increasing access to education and opportunities to share, and opportunities, the more things for kids now. With the theater has been with us a while, but it's just continues to be a highlight. It wasn't there to begin with. The outdoor theater that the kids perform in, and the boat building thing for kids still happens with their little boats, and that's. But I think in general, it just seems like the evolution has been to utilize more and more of Point Hudson and to draw it into that feeling of this is a full-on campus this weekend, every piece of it, and there are more places to eat or imbibe or sit and enjoy or listen to something indoor or outdoor that you're interested in than ever before. And I think the thing that might have gotten more difficult is choosing what to partake in. But it's just really an amazing event.
Yeah. What for you, Barb?
Yeah, I think that's true. Is trying to make the experience just better. Try to offer more is what one of the things we try very hard to do. Try to make it easier to get for people to actually experience getting on the water, so they're not just looking at boats. They're actually getting out and engaging in it, and that's kind of the Maritime Center's theme in general, and that we really take that seriously at Festival. We're trying to make that access for people to go out and enjoy the water is really big, and learn the education piece, just making the quality of what happens, getting more and having it be a high quality. But it's very, some of the stuff is very, very much the same. But bringing the level of appreciation up.
It works so good. Why change it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. In all of the interviews, people say, "What's new?" And that's difficult because so much of what's there, we bring. There's some new things every year, but that's not necessarily what's the best about the festival.
Yeah,
It's what I like. Your question was, what are you excited about?
Yeah.
And that's a little more pertinent because we don't bring in brand new things every year. One of the things we're doing is preserving the love of boats, and the evolution of boats has changed. So that's definitely, including some of the kayaks and the new construction is definitely a stretch of evolution, getting beyond core wooden boat building.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago seeing a bike manufacturer that was making bikes out of wood. You remember that?
Yeah, that was really cool. No, I've been trying to find him because that's a beautiful.
Was he in Portland or something?
I think so. I remember being out of Portland.
Boy, those
that
were
was stunning.
nice looking. Beautiful wooden frames.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
I just think it's amazing how there's been this passage of time, 38 years, that this wooden boat foundation that we started back then has persevered, and now of course it's blended with the Northwest Maritime Center. The organizations are side by side in this fabulous structure here that has been such a gift to the community, whether they knew it or not, or wanted it or not. But the whole purpose of this Maritime Center was to have a permanent home for the Wooden Boat Foundation and its dreams and visions, but also to make certain that this beautiful piece of the earth here at the entrance to Point Hudson Harbor would not become a condominium or a 5-star hotel, that it would really belong to anyone who wanted to belong to it. And it's just a wonderful thing to have this facility that then enhances and expands the Wooden Boat Festival and keeps the things that we cherish about it alive all year round.
So I'm just curious, for either of you, out of all the festivals you've been to, is there anything that really stands out one of those years that just comes to mind, like, wow, that was pretty cool, different, or anything like that?
Last year, the sail by standing on the Commons was, both Carrie and I, we weren't standing together, but it brought tears to both of our eyes because it was just magic. Gorgeous weather and little kids with, the boats they'd built waiting around, dragging them in kayaks all the way up to the most glorious 100-foot schooners. So that's really a spectacular moment. And the other one, when I used to just volunteer for Casey, and one year I worked on the docks, and catching people's lines when they come into festival and tie up on Thursday is one of the most fun things in the world to do, because people are so excited to be here and they're so happy. And it's just, for many people, they've been waiting all year to get here, and for some people it's the first time they've been here. But just that spirit, I'll never forget that moment. It was like a whole day of people just being so excited and so ecstatic, and I think that happens year after year after year.
Yeah,
that feeling is just something I will carry. It's beautiful.
What about for you, Hasse?
Oh, I'm just kind of thinking how they all blend together, and a year isn't a very long time, and the next thing you know, like Barb says, that Thursday when all the boats are coming in and we're upstairs in the sail loft working and looking out over the harbor, and it's just like, it's so beautiful. Here they come, all these stunning boats, and everything starts to come alive in this magical way. And some of the joy for me has, we in the Northwest just really cherish having the Northwest, and a lot of us know each other or of each other's businesses or boats, or there's that kind of a connection that's really special when people can come from BC or South Sound and we're all together here. But it's really fun for me, and one of the things that I get to do is I'm involved with teaching safety at sea seminars, and have done some of those in Annapolis, and got to be a judge for Cruising World Boat of the Year again in Annapolis. And through that I've met some luminaries in the not just wooden boat world, but people like Nigel Calder, who has quite a following with all of his incredible writing that he's done about everything maritime. His electrical mechanical Bible is on pretty much everybody's boat, and I would just meet these wonderful people, and I say, you got to come to Port Townsend. You got to see our wooden boat festival. You can't imagine. It's like the most magical thing. You just can't even imagine. And then every once in a while, someone of those people that I've met over there and want to share this with will show up. And it was very, very magical to have Nigel Calder come and go, oh, this is great. And last year he came back with his kids.
Wow.
He was so, and they're in their 20s, so but one of, I think, the most amazing years for me was when Lynn and Larry Pardee and John Guswell went to the Rose Theater. This is before we had our Maritime Center building here, and showed some of the footage, rare footage that they had of some of their early adventures in cruising. And when John Guswell was aboard, he left his little trekka in, I don't know now if it was Australia or New Zealand, but he joined Miles and Beryl Smeaton to help them get around the Horn. And that's when the boat was rolled and Beryl went overboard, and they got her back aboard. And actually, she got herself back aboard. She was a pretty intrepid person, and John kind of saved the day by, since the doghouse or the companionway hatch had washed away with a big sea, he battened it down the way you would batten down a hatch on a tall ship with tarpaulins and battens and literally nailing it down. And so to see that footage of John as a 20-year-old that he'd taken of Miles...
Video footage?
Yeah, of Miles and Beryl Smeaton. What would that have been? Not Super 8, but whatever the film was of the time.
Maybe 16 millimeter?
Yeah, probably.
8 millimeter.
And so he there's this living link that we have as mariners to those who came before us, and some of those mentors, like John Guswell or like Lynn and Larry, that you may never get a chance to meet necessarily, but it can happen here at the Wooden Boat Festival, and you realize that you're part of this magical celebration of the water, of cruising, of even if you never cruise outside the Northwest, to get in a boat and to be able to do that, and and maybe you didn't build the boat with your own hands, but you got to take care of it one way or the other, and those skills and that self-reliance, those values that were so beautifully displayed by people like John Guswell and Lynn and Larry and others that are in our community now, Dale Nordland and Sugar and Leslie on Alcyone and but anyway, that's to me the magic of it. But that, I think that event at that festival, watching that footage, and when John Guswell describing it himself will be my really strong memory.
Wow. Would that have been in the 70s probably? Or?
No, it wasn't that long ago.
No,
it might have even been during Casey's tenure. So, but it was before these buildings were up, so it was 5 years ago or so.
Oh, wow.
5 to 8.
Yeah.
I can't keep track of time. Should have been 30 years ago.
15 years.
I think the way that so many people are so accessible at festival is just so incredible. You don't find that a lot of places where you can bump into Lynn and Larry Pardee and sit down and talk to them for an hour. And they're very, very engaging and so excited to do that. People that come to this come because they want to talk to people. They're very just accessible and having a good time.
Yeah.
And
really cool.
The stories that the boats hold. That there's a vessel called Messenger 3 that comes from Victoria every year, and she is the judge's headquarters and kind of the head boat for Classic Boat Festival up there, and it belongs to Bill Noon and his wife Megan, and Megan grew up on the boat, and before that it was part of the mission boats that weren't necessarily missionaries aboard, but the ones that went up and when necessary had a pastor or a father or whatever aboard that could marry or bury people, but they were bringing supplies to BC's coast and the rugged places that people had nothing but those boats coming to deliver mail or food or help to get them to the hospital and over in Garden Bay or Hospital Bay there on the Sunshine Coast, and or people will come up and tell someone, my dad owned that boat, or my mom and dad took us sailing on that boat when we were little kids, and all of a sudden another piece of history comes alive for the then owner or the person who used to be involved with that boat, and the legacy of the vessels themselves as well as the sailors is something that's just such a magical part of it.
Yeah. So I'm just curious if you think the next generation is kind of taking the torch of keeping the maritime history and the wooden boat thing alive, or what that looks like.
I think they are. It's definitely a moving and changing, but there's some projects like the Girls Boat Building Project that's very, very sweet. There's a group of women that are just getting into sailing, and so I think there's a lot of people trying to keep it alive, and they may be doing it through different vessels, starting kayaks. I think that's why we kind of like getting people out on paddleboards and kayaks, because once you start loving being on the water and you recognize the freedom you can find by having a boat, it's great. But,
and one of the beautiful things about the Pacific Northwest is the opportunity to do sail training. So, for example, the Schooner Adventurous through the Sound Experience program takes out girls and boys from 14 to 19 or so for 4 to 10 days at a time through the San Juan Islands, and their whole crew is composed of 20-something young men and women, the captain, the crew, that are so passionate about sail training. And they also, during the school year, they're taking kids out and they're doing a netting, a trawl, so they can see what's in Puget Sound, and they're looking at plastics, they're looking at how much dissolved carbon dioxide, they're looking at, there's an environmental component or awareness to this. There's sail training in our longboats. That's a very accessible thing for kids in our community, and what I see as an employer of young sailmakers in Port Townsend here, a lot of our crew ongoingly have been, in their 20s, have come to us because they did sail training. Some on the East Coast, some on the West Coast, so on the Lynx, on the Pride of Baltimore on the East Coast, here on the Schooner Adventurous, or the Yawl Carlin out of Camp Four Winds up in Orcas Island. And so it's a pretty compelling passion that I don't think will ever go away. And people in their 20s who are drawn to nature, to whether it's being on the water or being in the mountains or working on an organic farm, often find their way to the boat world and realize that there are opportunities here to work, to contribute through sail training, to be involved, and it's pretty phenomenal. And we definitely have it going on in Port Townsend.
The sail training here is just amazing. I mean, kids nowadays, I have a 17-year-old, and she's had the chance to go to Vietnam. She's in Guatemala right now. I mean, kids do so much in the world right now. And last year, their school trip was to go for a week on the Adventurous. And the kids were all like, oh, well, last year we went to Vietnam. They went into it with, actually, I'd have to say, a pretty bad attitude. And they came home saying it was the best thing they ever did,
Wow.
So that's the power of sail training, to go into something. I watched these kids, every one of them had a bad attitude, saying, oh, well, this isn't Vietnam, and we want to go international, and because they want to do it for the stories they can tell. But they spent a week on that boat and came home just hearts full, passionate about boats and water, and it was beautiful. So I think there's some really successful programs out there doing a great job.
It really is transformational.
It is. I wish everybody could do it, and of course, getting kids to do it is the hard part, and getting schools to embrace it as to see how important it is harder than once the kids experience it, they're in. They're engaged.
It's I'm actually on the board of directors now of Sound Experience, and in the early 80s I had a chance to go aboard as a crew member, a volunteer in the first women's trip that the vessel ever did, and I had just sailed on the schooner Ragland from Mexico to the Marquesas. And the only reason I knew the schooner Ragland is she came here for a wooden boat festival, and we'd all become friends, and she was a 85 on deck and 101 overall, and I got to sail to the Marquesas. And when I came back from that, this was the year Mount St. Helens blew up, so I remember it vividly, 1980, and the schooner Adventurous needed female crew that could do this women's trip. So I stepped aboard, and it was an elder hostel thing, and I just saw the power of it, how this ship is not going anywhere unless we all work together. And in fact, it's going to be a joy to do that. And so I started volunteering, and I did that anywhere from 1 to 5 weeks for about 10 years or so, and then got pretty involved with my own family and the sail loft. And so last summer I went again on a girls' trip, and I hadn't been on for a lot of time. And Corey Milke was the captain. She's just brilliant. And the same magic was there, only even in a more powerful way, because of the environmental component, because of how I think it blew everybody's minds again, those of us who hadn't been aboard at all or in a while, how everybody was making their own meals together, making the ship sail together, creating the entertainment together at night. And I remember there was a lovely year when we had something called the Summer UC Symposium that was through the Wooden Boat Foundation. And kids would we'd go for a week on the Adventurous. They'd come back here, and in the boat shop that Sam Connor started and Ed Luchard ran back then, and Steve, kids would build a little El Toro, and we'd make sails upstairs at night. And that was the second week. And the third week, the kids would take a cruise in the boat they built over to Mystery Bay. And so it's kind of a big thing. We did that for about 3 years. That was a really great program. But anyway, to back up about what happens on the schooner Adventurous, and I'm sure other sail training vessels as well, but the schooner Adventurous in particular has been my experience, where the kids were at night. We had one program, and one of them was having them do their journal, and then they could read something to us from it. And one of the boys from Colorado said the most hilarious things. One of them was, we had this thing of, okay, if you had a boat, what would it be like, and where would you take it? And kids were saying, well, most of them had never sailed before, but they had this idea of going to the South Pacific or whatever, and a lot of them said they'd have a double ender. And we get to the kid from Colorado, and he goes, double ender, don't all boats have 2 ends? It was just so priceless. But he was the kid who read from his journal the thing that epitomized sail training to me. He said, now I see how the world could work. That was his takeaway. It's like, wow. Okay, everybody's pitching in. Mm-hmm. Nobody doesn't get up and clean the decks or clean the heads or get in the galley if it's their turn. Nobody gets out of anything, and nothing happens unless we all do it together. And you know what? It's fun. Mm. Maybe it's not always the greatest thing, but many hands make light work, and here's what has to happen. And it's so elemental when you're on a boat, because there's really it's very obvious what has to happen and what the consequences are if it doesn't happen in a certain amount of time, and what it takes to work together, and it's just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It's such a great opportunity. And so it's wonderful when people come here for our festival to see ships like Lady Washington, Schooner Adventurous, the Salt Ship, the Swift that'll come down from Canada, and the Oriole from Tacoma, the Odyssey from Tacoma, and maybe the Carlin will be coming. I don't know if she's coming down from the San Juans, but just seeing that, there's something, my family didn't have boats growing up, and I wanted to get out on the water, and I didn't know how to do it, and I had the great opportunity to go to the South Pacific with my family doctor in the end, and his wife and his kids, and I learned navigation, actually crewed on a bunch of boats, and so that's how it happened for me. But today, kids can see, there's longboats, there's sailing programs, there's the Adventurous, there's, there are opportunities that really aren't that costly for people who don't, whose family don't have boats.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Well, I really appreciate your time today, both of you, and wondered if you wanted to make any other comments you'd like to make, Barb?
Oh, come to festival. It's the best time ever.
September 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
5th through 7th.
Oh, sorry.
Right, but if you want, that Thursday is the 4th, and that's actually when the energy starts building. It's a beautiful day. It's a really fun day.
Okay, how about you, Hasse? Anything else?
Oh, yeah, I echo Barb's sentiment. Come to the festival and come by water or by land, and just we appreciate all the people who do come. So I want to say thank you to the people who come and participate with us by boat or by land.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Carol and Barb, so much for doing the interview. And actually, Carol goes by Hasse because there was way too many Carols in her elementary school class. So thanks, Hasse and Barb. Appreciate it so much. That was really fun to learn more about the festival. I hope it goes well this year. And again, if you're listening and have never attended, or if you have attended and can make it this time, I would encourage you to do so. It's going to be an absolute blast, September 5th through the 7th. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by email, dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. You can subscribe to my e-newsletter, as I mentioned earlier. You can leave comments on my website, hookedonwoodenboats.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube if you look for Wooden Boat Dan. I'd love to hear from you. Send me pictures and stories, and let me know what you're up to in the wooden boat world. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by going to my homepage and clicking on the tip button and leave a tip for me. Or if you make purchases at Amazon.com, if you click through my link first, I get paid a small commission. So you would go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon and then make your purchase, and I get paid a little bit there, and I appreciate that. So anyway, have a great week, folks. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. God bless.